By 4 p.m., you've already made thousands of decisions, and your brain is out of fuel. You started the day sharp. You had answers. You made calls. You handled problems before most people finished their coffee. But somewhere around 2 or 3 p.m., something changed. Small decisions started feeling huge. Emails went unanswered. You kept switching between tasks without finishing any of them. You told yourself you were tired, that you needed more sleep. But the real reason is different. And it has nothing to do with how hard you work or how motivated you are. It's called decision fatigue. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your brain when it hits, you won't look at your afternoon the same way again. Here's what decision fatigue actually looks like in a real day. You wake up and your first decisions come easy. What to wear, what to eat, whether to check email first or start with your top priority task. These feel automatic because your brain is fresh. But every single decision, no matter how small, draws from the same mental resource. Psychologists call it executive function. It lives primarily in the prefrontal cortex, and unlike your muscles, it doesn't give you a clear signal when it's running low. You don't feel a cramp. You don't feel breathless. You just start making worse choices. Or worse, you stop choosing altogether. You default to whatever's easiest. You skip the gym because planning the workout feels like too much. You order takeout because the thought of deciding what to cook is somehow overwhelming. You approve things at work without really reading them because your brain is conserving whatever's left. This is not laziness. This is not a character flaw. This is your prefrontal cortex doing exactly what it's designed to do, protecting you from complete shutdown by rationing resources. In 1998, social psychologist Roy Baumeister ran a series of experiments that changed how we think about willpower and decision-making. His team found that people who had to exert self-control earlier in a task performed significantly worse on tasks that came after. He called this ego depletion, the idea that mental effort draws from a limited reservoir. Later research by Shai Danziger and colleagues analyzed over 1,100 parole board decisions across a full day. The pattern was striking. Judges granted parole about 65% of the time first thing in the morning. By late morning, that rate had dropped close to zero, not because the cases got worse, but because the judge's capacity for complex evaluation had... What's being depleted isn't motivation or intelligence. It's the neurochemical fuel that powers deliberate thinking. Primarily dopamine and norepinephrine, two neurotransmitters essential for the prefrontal cortex to evaluate options, weigh risks, and override impulsive defaults. When these drop, your brain doesn't shut off. It shifts to a different operating mode, faster, more automatic, more reactive. Designed for survival, not for the complex decisions modern life demands from you by the time it's 3 p.m. This is why judges make lazy default decisions. Why executives snap at their families after a hard day at work. Why you've agreed to things you didn't actually want to agree to, simply because your brain didn't have the resources left to push back. Here's what makes decision fatigue especially brutal today. The sheer volume of low-stakes decisions your brain is processing before you even sit down to do real work. The average knowledge worker is interrupted every 11 minutes. Every interruption requires a decision, stop what I'm doing or keep going. Every notification is a micro-decision about attention. You're making decisions about decisions before you're making actual decisions. And each one costs. Add to that the phenomenon of choice overload. More options don't make us feel more free. They make us feel more mentally taxed. And there's another factor almost nobody talks about, cognitive multitasking. Every time you switch between deep work and a quick check of messages, your prefrontal cortex has to fully disengage from one cognitive context and re-engage in another. Researchers estimate it can take up to 23 minutes to fully return to deep focus after an interruption. The goal isn't to eliminate decision fatigue. You can't. Your prefrontal cortex will always have a daily budget. The goal is to spend that budget on what actually matters. Front load your most important decisions. The highest value cognitive work belongs in your first 2 to 3 hours, not your email, not your calendar. Your most important work, when your neurochemical reserves are at their peak. Barack Obama wore the same style of suit every day. Mark Zuckerberg wore the same gray t-shirt. Not because they lack fashion sense, because they understood that every trivial decision removed from the morning was a decision that couldn't drain the prefrontal cortex before the ones that actually mattered. Batch your low-stakes decisions. Instead of deciding what to eat for lunch 3 times a week, spend 20 minutes on Sunday creating a rotation. Instead of deciding when to check email throughout the day, schedule 2 windows. Batching turns repeated micro-decisions into a single decision executed automatically. Protect your transition time. Between intense cognitive tasks, your brain needs a reset. A 1-0-minute walk. Silence. Even staring out a window. These aren't laziness. They're neurological maintenance. Understand the role of nutrition. Your prefrontal cortex is a glucose-intensive structure. Skipping meals or relying on caffeine alone creates peaks and valleys in the neurochemical environment your dopaminergic circuits depend on. This kind of research is what Cognitive Insight Lab covers every week. If you want to keep up, subscribing takes 2 seconds. And if you want to go deeper on the specific compounds that support prefrontal function and neurotransmitter balance, I've linked an article in the description. If you want to address decision fatigue at the neurochemical level, the research points to a few key areas. Acetylcholine contributes to acetylcholine synthesis and has been shown in multiple trials to support cognitive function and mental energy, particularly in tasks requiring sustained attention over long periods. Phosphatidylserine has been shown in clinical trials to support cognitive processing speed and working memory, 2 things that take the hardest hit under decision fatigue. N-acetyl L-tyrosine is a bioavailable form of tyrosine, a direct precursor to both dopamine and norepinephrine, the 2 neurotransmitters your prefrontal cortex depends on to evaluate options and override impulsive defaults. These aren't stimulants. They don't mask fatigue or push you through on borrowed energy. They support the actual infrastructure your executive function runs on. Now, if you'd rather not research each compound individually, figure out the right dosages, and build a stack from scratch, there are formulas that combine these in clinically relevant doses into a single daily capsule. I've done that research. I've linked what I found in the description so you can decide if it makes sense for you, but whether you go that route or not, the structural changes to your day come first, always. Decision fatigue is real, it's measurable, and it's happening to almost every person functioning at a high level in modern life. The good news, once you see it, you can design around it. Front load what matters, batch what doesn't. Give your brain the recovery windows it needs. And understand the neurochemistry underneath, because when you know what's actually running low, you can make smarter choices about how to refill it. I'll see you in the next one. This video is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before starting any supplement.